So so we are going to record this and we will publish it. And I think the key thing is if we just, I mean, you know, it's not easy, but we're trying to talk one at a time. So then we can then always edit it as we need to. And I will try and keep the pace going, and people will just have to stop me if I'm going too fast. But I'm very conscious that concentrating through this kind of technology is tricky, and there's a need to keep some speed. So in terms of Chair's welcome and introduction, I think we felt it was important that we had a board meeting. We are doing it virtually, and we have kept the agenda as light as possible, focusing it very much on the material issues at the moment. And we will be recording this and publishing it because we think that's part of our accountability to our members and the wider public. Can I just ask if there are any apologies for absence? And any declarations of interest? And I'm now going to cough, excuse me.
None. No.
Minutes of the Board of Directors held on the 29th of January. As I understand it, there are two points that have been made. I mean, Don, I think Lewis has made a point, which is about under the Audit Committee, and he liked the detail minuted, which is that around the overtime payments. So we can insert that. And then Anne, I think you had a comment.
Yes, if it's okay, Chair. There's just 2 points that I wanted to add to the patient feedback, particularly from CM. Obviously, it's not a verbatim issue, the minutes, but I think the essence of what that contribution was around was being believed about the feedback of the patient experience. And I think she mentioned epistemic injustice and disregard, and that we must understand this in order to counteract it. And it's quite ironic, I suppose, that the epistemic injustice and disregard was missed off.
Yeah. So can we insert that, please? And I apologise because I signed off the minutes, and you're absolutely right, and I really welcome you pointing that out. Thank you. So we'll insert that. Is there anything else, Anne?
No, thank you.
Thank you. In terms of questions from members of the public, my understanding is we haven't had any questions from members of the public. We also decided to suspend the patient story. We just felt we couldn't do that in a way that was safe. Obviously, we have a commitment to having a patient story, but he doesn't feel that just at the moment that that's something we can do safely for people. So we're not going to do that today. I will take the Chair's report as read. As you can see, it sets out the results of the board QI project, and I'm incredibly grateful to Gavin, Akosia, Dom, and particularly Nick in terms of pulling that together. It sets out the chairs of the committees for the year ahead, and it also outlines our approach to the well-led framework across the year ahead, notwithstanding that it's not going to be quite the year that we were anticipating. So hopefully that's okay with people. It appears that it is. Thank you. So can I now move to the Chief Executive's report, please?
Thank you, Chair. So in my report, Chair, I've set out 3 key issues really at this particular time, and just want to clearly start with what I'm sure is uppermost on people's minds at the moment, which is how the Trust is responding to the national level 4 incidents in tackling the risks and issues presented by COVID-19. So as a Trust, we have stood up our incident management team. We have a gold command system in place being led at executive level. We have been, obviously, this is an evolving and fast-moving situation, and as national guidance has come out either directly from the government or from NHS England, we have been responding accordingly. From a mental health perspective, our absolute key priorities are focused on providing the care to the most vulnerable under our care. And what that is meaning for us is that we're having to deploy our resources in different ways. And this is particularly impacting some of our routine work and also the way in which we deliver our work, most significantly utilising the technology platforms that we have and providing more support remotely through the Attend Anywhere software that we have procured alongside our other digital platforms. I think it's really, really important to note that the significant work that in fact we as an organisation put in to prepare for the EU exit has certainly stood us in good stead in terms of looking at the risks across issues like supply chains. I have to say how incredibly proud I am and the whole executive team is of the way in which our staff have and continue to respond to this. That is all staff right across the organisation in both clinical facing roles, our doctors, our nurses, our therapists, our pharmacists, our peer support workers. I could go on, but also most importantly, all those in support roles across the organisation, from our housekeepers, receptionists and administrative staff to our specialists in our corporate support teams. Everybody is pulling together and absolutely focused on both planning and responding to what is perhaps the most significant risk the NHS has faced in its lifetime. So inevitably there are some risks emerging for us. One of the areas is around the testing for staff. As an organisation, we have about 6% of our workforce at the moment who are self-isolating. We know that there is a national solution being developed at the moment to enable testing for staff, and this can't come online quick enough really. What it will mean is that if we are able to test our staff, we can get them back into the workplace where they want to be, supporting patients quicker. We are obviously using our strengths around IT and digital, but having said that, we have actually overnight had a large percentage of our workforce move into remote working, and therefore we are procuring some additional kit to provide the support to the staff. And equally, as the world goes to online remote home working, we're seeing and experiencing at times the stress on the internet being a feature of that, and that risk, I think, will become clearer over the weekdays ahead. Having said that, we are able to maintain our core digital services at this time. It's been much reported, the issues around access to personal and protective equipment, so PPE for our staff, and I can confirm that we have been able to secure this, and we have a very robust system in place to monitor access to this. Having said that, this is a national issue, and I think also as a mental health and learning disability provider, we're acutely aware of the need for our social care partners, our nursing homes, our residential homes, and the third sector organisations that play a very significant part of providing support to our patients, also being able to secure the same access to this kit that the NHS has. And I know that nationally, NHS England, the government, is looking at that. From a trust perspective, we do have some particular hotspots, given the 6% absence through self-isolating, and we've got good plans in place around the mitigation of that for our staff. What I think would be helpful, Chair, is to hand over to Akosi Nayan, who for the past week has taken the gold command across the organisation, to give you some of her reflections on how we're responding to that in particular, and also to bring some other colleagues in. And once we've completed that, I would just like to briefly mention one other thing that isn't contained in my report to share with the board today.
Thank you, Sam. Akosi.
Excellent. So just really in support of everything that Sam's saying, my biggest reflection is how well across the organisation at all levels of leadership, people are responding and supporting our plans for COVID-19 and our preparation. Some of the key things for us at the moment as an organisation are really looking through the demand and capacity that we have within our services to make sure that we can wrap the appropriate support around our staff and make sure that we can safely staff those critical services. In addition to that, we've had some focus work over the last week looking at how we best support people using our services, stepping up our isolation ward and plans for all of that, and just thanks to colleagues across the board who are supporting the scoping and planning of that to make sure that we can, during this period, support the wider system, our acute colleagues, while continuing to deliver some of our most critical services. I think it would be helpful at this point in sharing reflections in leading Gold Command over the last period to bring in Gavin, because there's been an awful amount of work that we've had to do around people and workforce.
Thanks, Akosia. So a number of issues really in terms of the workforce. Clearly, our priority is ensuring their well-being at this particular time, and that's both for staff continuing to be in the workplace, but those also working at home. So we put a number of health and wellbeing initiatives in place to assist both of those staff groups. Communications and engagement is obviously also critical at this time. So we're running webinars 3 times a week. Communications are going out daily following Gold Command. And we've also set up both a email address and a helpline for staff who have particular personal circumstances they want help and advice on. And then lastly, Chair, we've touched on this, but we've also sent a note out to all staff saying that if they feel that they are able to volunteer and be redeployed to other parts of the organisation that are feeling the greatest amount of pressure, whether they could let themselves known, and we'll be doing a matching process over the next few days, making sure that the supply that we're identifying can be matched with the demand.
Thanks, Gavin. The other bits just to highlight, Peter, and then to bring in Rick and Nick, our clinical professional advisory committee, really, really important at this stage, bringing the voice of people using our services for all of our clinical and professional leads in helping us to think through the decisions that we are having to make at pace in relation to stepping up and starting services. So as I described with the isolation ward, or stopping services, and more importantly, making sure that any decisions that we make have a good ethical and moral basis. And our peer support is absolutely essential to that. So I just wanted to flag the work being led currently by Liz Holland in supporting particularly people using our services through the Recovery College during this period. Rick, could I come to you just for the an update in relation to some of the work we've done around our vulnerable patients?
Yes, thanks Akosia, thanks everyone for the update. So just wanted to cover a couple of things. So we're working to make sure that we're prepared for patients who do have comorbid coronavirus and serious mental illness, and how we're going to manage them in our hospital, and as much as possible make sure that we don't add to the pressure in the acute trusts. I'm working with chief medical officers and chief nursing officers across the patch to make sure that we're well integrated, and that there's a really strong agreement on how we manage pathways both in and out of acute system, and also how we keep, as I said, mental health patients out of their system as much as possible. So some of that is around ensuring that we have end of life planning and do not resuscitate agreements in place at the point of admission for patients who are in very vulnerable groups. So that's the elderly or people with multiple comorbidities, and that is going to mean some difficult conversations. But the earlier those conversations happen with patients and families, the better that will be along the way as things perhaps get more busy. We've got good protocols in place regarding the treatments that we can provide and the amount of oxygen that we can provide to patients who may be affected by coronavirus in our units. But we're also clear on what we can't do. This has been called ceiling of care, but we're also looking at whether that's the right way of describing it, because it's not that we're not caring anymore once we reach the ceiling. It's about where is the limit of the interventions we're able to safely provide in our organisation. So we're making sure that we've got that defined and agreed with our trusts externally, the acute trusts. We're making sure that our own staff are well trained, that where there are gaps, people are upskilled, where people need refresher courses, that those happen. We've got a number of staff who said they're coming back from retirement, which is fantastic. That's both doctors, nurses, and other clinicians as well, and also staff who have any capacity in their jobs to increase hours as well. And we're looking just to finally say that as things change, we may need to adjust our rotas to make sure we've got round-the-clock care for our patients, and we've got plans in place, contingency plans in place for those which have been agreed by our medical staff, as well as people agreeing that they may have to be redeployed, and also an expectation that people will be working a bit out of their comfort zone. And how do we're making sure that we can support staff with that.
Okay, thank you. Nick?
Just to add one more layer to that, Chair, I think in addition to all of the work that Akusha and Rick have helpfully outlined around our sort of core services, we're also aware that the impact of COVID-19 is enormous in terms of the psychological impact on the wider community. So we are proactively, Dan and I are proactively looking at the comms and engagement strategy that we want to develop that promotes resilience and self-care in the wider community. We're also currently the primary care and wellbeing services are looking at creating a new telephone self-help line, which can become the first point of contact for all services. And in addition, we're also looking at what specific support we can put in place for NHS staff who obviously will be going through some difficult circumstances in the times ahead.
Okay, thank you, Nick. And in terms of business continuity, Sim, how are we doing in terms of maintaining business critical services?
Okay, so each area has got its own business continuity plan, and there are daily meetings where they are working through to understand, with some of the staffing absences that Sam's mentioned, how we maintain those business critical services. So those would be particularly our acute and our urgent care pathways. And what that's meaning is all of the services working very collaboratively together and sharing their plans so that we can step some non-essential services down. That is moving some of our staff who are working in community teams into the acute and the urgent care pathway, making sure that they're supported and they get the right training. So looking at their professional qualifications, skills and experience and matching them up with gaps that we have in our services, whilst at the same time making sure that we can maintain as much routine activity as possible, but using different ways of delivering that. So non-face-to-face mechanisms, telephony, and some of the digital solutions that have been mentioned. So it's reviewed on a daily basis and then fed into Roll Command.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And I mean, it's just fantastic how it's clear that everyone has really stepped up to the challenge. So that's really great to hear. And I'm sure we all take quite a lot of assurance from what's been said. Do people, I suppose there are three areas, aren't there? There's the patient experience, there's staff experience, and then we just probably need to cover just a couple of the governance issues. Do people have any questions that they want to ask to clarify issues around patient experience?
Yes, could I ask a question, Peter?
Yes, of course.
It's two actually. One was just to confirm that through the peer support that Akosia mentioned, that in actual fact people are aware that the current changes to legislation that are proposed will only be temporary, and that patients are reassured about that, and then it's going to be reviewed. Is to Simone really around, are we able to use the capacity of the third sector in particular, which is often, because if we're concentrating our forces quite rightly in the way that you've described, just my concern would be, are we using the community resources in the third sector? Are you able to coordinate this in some way as an NHS senior manager?
Yes, so we've been working really closely with third sector providers to make sure that we can deliver that pathway of care and utilise their skills and experience. Some of their staff, they've closed some of their centres, but we're using some of their staff to help with the whole pathway to support our patients, particularly those in the community.
Okay, thank you. Martin.
If I may, for the record, because we are being recorded, just a general comment on all that we've just heard before my question on patients, if I may. The general comment, and we mentioned this in the private meeting, I did, as a non-exec, attend the Gold meeting a week ago last Wednesday. And just to provide assurance and governance, really, I found the command and control, the leadership, very strong, and the necessarily narrow focus, as you've outlined, Chair, and has been endorsed by Sam and others, the focus around patients, staff, and resilience and welfare was spot on. And I was drawing on similar goal group experience from policing world, both historic and more recently, and was very reassured by what I saw. Just wanted to put that on the record, if I may. Now, in terms of patients and service, I rightly or wrongly divide our patients into three, or our service users. Inpatients, the known and the unknown. The known being predominantly community-based, the unknown quite clearly being community-based. And we have touched already, this may not be the time, but I wonder if there's any thoughts to that unknown and growing community of mental health sufferers, if I can put it that way, who are joining this through the virus and through everything that we're living through. How are we reaching out as a trust, as a service, to that unknown group?
Okay. Who'd like to pick up on that? Is Dan, is that something you want to pick up on?
Shall I come in, Peter?
Please, Nick, yes.
I think, Martin, there are three broad groups of people in that unknown group that you're describing that we are wanting to specifically target. So there are those people who are suffering from anxiety related to the physical illness itself, either the impact on their own lives or on the lives of relatives. And that does then exacerbate some people with health anxiety and OCD symptoms. The second group of people who are people who are directly affected by the broader social and economic changes, so losing your job, loss of financial income, and also some of the specific requirements around social isolation for the over 70s. So there's that second group of people who we really want to focus on. But the final group is that we need to recognise that all of us are more vulnerable to suffering from mental health problems, because the normal protective factors that prevent us from being emotionally unwell are very much reduced in the current context, and that includes social contact, having a clear sense of meaning and purpose, having clear activity, goal-directed activity, being physically well, and also the dangers of people obviously drinking more and potentially getting caught up in news. So what we're wanting to do is develop a strategy that each of the three groups, through initially our media campaign, but also then enabling those groups to get in contact with us through our new mental health line.
And
can I just come in Nick, and just add the point I made earlier about staying safe online, and the growing risks around fraudsters, scammers, and certain companies, including betting companies, targeting vulnerable people. I think those issues around staying safe online and what we can do to support people, I'd just like to add, and I think that is relevant to your third group.
Yeah. Can I come in?
Absolutely.
So,
So
I've got Joe, and then I've got Gordon, please.
Thank you, Nick. Just one question in relation to what you said, particularly regarding the third group, and that's a question around the trust capacity to deal with any increased demand, because I don't think there's any way that we cannot provide additional support and information and service, but there is an issue or potential issue in terms of how we will cope if the demand is extraordinary.
And Gordon, your question?
My question relates to, I suppose, the shift to a greater physical healthcare that will be necessary within SPFT as a consequence of illness within the hospital, but also the fact that it will be difficult to transfer patients to the acute sector. And I just wondered what Rick and Akosha, clearly there needs to be some sort of additional support and training for staff who may not have had to deliver such care previously.
Can I pick that up, please, Peter? It's Rick.
Yes, please, Rick.
Yeah, thanks, Gordon. Really important that this is discussed. So we've got plans in place, and actually training is happening today and ongoing for staff, doctors and nurses around physical healthcare. We have 140 something RGNs, general nurses, within our trust. All of our doctors, of course, are medical doctors, and so they may be sort of, some of them more distant perhaps from working in physical health circumstances, but for our consultants we've got special training to refresh and upskill them. We've put together resource packs for them as well. Our weekly psychiatrist bulletin has links to all the advice and guidance that they need, and we're putting together very clear algorithms for treating the physically unwell on our wards and what the treatments might be, and making sure with our pharmacy team that we have the right medications. As I mentioned earlier, that also we have to make sure that we're equipped with enough oxygen, which will be a challenge as the whole system is finding its challenge in getting hold of oxygen. So we're making sure that our oxygen that we do have is in the right places, and most of that will be focused on our COVID ward, which will be in Millview Hospital. And then the other parts are making sure that when people are managing people with physical health presentations associated with COVID, is that they have the right protection. So we have, I think Sam mentioned, we've got enough PPE, personal protective equipment, for our staff. And for instance, our junior doctors will all have their own packs, and I've just seen this morning how that will work. That they'll have a kind of belt with a kind of a bum bag type around the waist, which goes, then they get their own protective equipment in there, so they've got that with them. So whether they're working on the wards or in the community, if there's someone that they're going to be managing who is positive for coronavirus or felt to be positive, they'll have the right equipment to manage that safely, and that way we can be assured that we're looking after our staff and keeping them well as our patients.
Okay, thank you very much. Martin.
Just wanted to come back with a comment of grateful to Nick, Anna, and then Gordon, for understanding and making sense of my question and providing reassurance that maybe that could be the way we report moving forward across the categories that Nick and Anna added to, I think, around our fundamental basic services. I understood what Nick, Anna and Gordon were saying around 3+1+1 maybe categories, and that might just be helpful for these public meetings as we provide reassurance and effectively performance reports on what we're doing and how we're getting on.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin. Sam, sorry, Akosia, before we move to, I want to talk about staff in a moment, and then I'm going to ask Sam to respond to that. Akosia, is there anything you want to say just in conclusion in terms of patient experience?
Absolutely. It was just to Gordon's point in relation to the clinical thresholds for care. So Rick has summarised all of the work that we've taken forward through nursing and medicine. But one thing I just want to highlight is our work across the system. We're not operating in isolation. So Rick through the CMO group, myself through the CNO group are working with the system to be really clear about the point of transfer for people who will require acute respiratory care. So we're upskilling in as far as possible to deliver best possible care within this setting, but also clear about those thresholds out. More importantly, and should the system become overwhelmed, what support they're able to give us within the organisation to deliver care within that setting. So it's about those reciprocal arrangements.
Okay, thank you very much, Akosia. Sam, in terms of, I think people have been very clear about the steps we're putting in place to try and support staff and to support their well-being through what is clearly going to be a very difficult time, both for them individually and professionally. My sense is that, are we getting, what's the feedback we're getting from staff about what's really important? Are we confident we can have everything in place? When do you think testing will arrive? Are we confident we've got supply of protective equipment? And are we confident that the well-being steps are going to be in place in a timely way? I think that seems to be a question we should be just checking.
Thank you, Chair. So it's a question we're asking ourselves continuously as well. I think the feedback we've had generally from staff so far is they found the communications helpful, the continuous updates that the Trust have been providing based on national guidance and reporting on this matter. And we've been moving as quickly as we can to put things in place to support our staff, and received incredibly positive feedback about that. Notwithstanding, it is a period of that has created some levels of anxiety amongst our staff group, and that's understandable, particularly given some of the issues they have, either being within the group that have received shielding advice or the group that have been asked to isolate. It is unfortunate that we don't have a staff testing system established and in place today for our staff. Having said that, the wider system, both nationally and regionally, has been responding to that is incredibly unprecedented. And nationally, this has been given the absolute utmost priority. And we understand staff testing for London will come online and be available this week, and that will follow shortly after. And of course, locally, we've been working with our acute colleagues who've got access to laboratories to see what we can get up and running. And as a system, the Sussex Health and Care Partnership, the senior leaders in the system, we have committed to prioritise that and get that up and running as quickly as we can. Clearly, there are some challenges around logistics. I think the staff wellbeing is something we will keep under continuous review. We will be seeking some feedback from our staff on how they are experiencing the support we're putting in place and what more we can do for them. And equally, we need to be taking a similar approach with our patients, our carers, our third sector partners and organisations. And I think we are very mindful that as a slightly larger organisation, where we've been able to mobilise things like digital platforms, we want to make those available to our third sector partners as well, and we've been seeking to do that. This is it, and I think just to really underline that point, it is a whole system response from our communities, from all of our public sector partners, and we're working together as closely as we can with them at that time, and making sure that through our contribution to that planning, that the needs of people with mental health and or a learning disability are seen to be treated as a priority, particularly given the vulnerabilities there.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other questions in terms of the staff experience? I think we've had quite a full report from the executive. Okay, can we now move to the governance-y bit? Can we now move to governance? I mean, obviously, our statutory duties pretty much stay the same, although there have been some changes. Our fiduciary duties stay the same. We're still the first line regulator, but clearly we don't want to be imposing any burdens on a busy executive or imposing any burdens on the organisation. What do you think being well led through this period it needs to look like? Sally.
Yes, thank you, Peter. A good question. So my role in this as Deputy Chief Exec and Chief Finance Officer will be to maintain the best we can business as usual. So there's good work we're doing behind the scenes, as we'll come on to later with things like the annual plan and the year end. And we want to make sure that when we come out of this, although that's quite unknown at the moment, we're in the best shape possible. But I think the point you're making is not to make sure that we're not overburdening frontline staff with bureaucracy. So we're looking at our standing financial instructions and standing orders to make sure that decision making can be made in good order.
Yeah. Well, obviously we're really committed to being as light touch as we can be, and to be as fleet of foot as we can be, and anything we can do that actually releases the burden or makes decision making faster, we'll do. One question I have before I invite other people to come in. I mean, obviously as non-execs, we're used to doing visits. We're used to trying to be visible across the organisation. What are you looking for from us, Sam, at the moment?
Thank you, Chair. Well, clearly, just in terms of we really welcome the visibility contributions that our non-executives make. However, we are in extraordinary times, and at the moment we are not even welcoming visitors into hospitals. That's a protective measure we've taken to safeguard both our patients and our staff who are working in those and accommodated within those places at the moment. And clearly, as a board, we need to observe the government guidance as well. So it's really important at this particular point in time, as leaders of a healthcare organisation, that we are modelling that and minimising the risk to self and others as much as possible. I think what we need from our board at this point in time is the ability to work at pace with what is an evolving, fast-moving situation. The recognition that we're offering up some of the burdens that we have across the organisation whilst maintaining that business as usual focus. So availability when necessary and called upon by the executive team is welcome. And I know that we are putting in place the rota for our non-executive directors so that we can call upon you as needed. And I'll be providing a weekly highlight summary of what is underway at the national, the regional and locally within the Sussex Health and Care Partnership and our organisation in our response to COVID-19.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or points that board members wanted to make at this point?
Thank you, Sam. One thing I would urge is that you don't hesitate to ask any of us, because I don't think it's always clear what additional skills we bring to the board. So the only way that you'll find out is by asking.
Well, we do actually.
Sorry, one suggestion. I think you're absolutely right there, Joe. Maybe we yesterday sent a survey out across our organisation around asking that very question. I think it'll probably be helpful for us as a board to complete that as well, and therefore we can bear that in mind as we proceed with this. So we will get that survey out to our non-executive directors as well. I think we've had nearly 140 staff already respond to that who are keen to draw on the full set of skills.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Just on that, I mean, I read that request yesterday, and what was unclear was whether it applied only to staff, and whether you're looking for people with medical and clinical expertise. So, yeah, some clarity around that will be useful. Certainly happy to respond in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. It's been sent out to all of our staff. So we'll just get it recirculated to our non-execs, and it'd be great if that was completed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. One of the things, Dan, I wonder if there's one of the things you could just talk a bit about the communications plans that you're putting in place.
Yes, thanks, Chair. So as others have said, a particular focus of our communication strategy over the last couple of weeks has quite rightly been on staff engagement and communication. So the webinars, daily briefings, intranet updates that people have mentioned. We're now moving into a phase where we're focusing on public messaging, as Nick has already mentioned. The point I just wanted to underline off the back of what Nick was saying was that there's a real appetite and on the behalf of our local media to get reliable information and advice out there to our local communities on managing well-being and resilience during these really testing times. So our plan is to harness the expertise of Nick and others to be getting out across media, and that's both print, broadcast and social media in the coming days to get that general advice and information out to local public. But we'll be looking to build on that in the weeks ahead, because there will be a need for more focused messaging in relation to particular vulnerable groups.
Thank you. I think that's really, really helpful and really important. Thank you very much. So, I mean, this is obviously a very fast-moving situation. I think we're assured by the reports we've had from the team. It's clear that the team are working well together, and I know, Sam, that the organisation has really responded to this. Clearly, this is going to be going on for some months, and this is something, I think, staff well-being, patient experience, making sure that we're helping people and supporting people, both with their own the pressures they're under individually, as well as the pressure they're going to be under at work, is really, really important. And I know that anything that the organisation can do to support patients, to support staff, we will, and you know that you have our support in the steps that you're putting in place. So thank you very much. Thank the team very much. Thank the staff very much from all of us. Thank you. I'm going to move us on now. In terms of the Quality Committee report, my understanding is that there's nothing that comes out of the Quality Committee report that we haven't just been discussing under the Chief Executive's report. Is that right?
Yeah, I think probably
that's correct.
Okay. So I mean, clearly the quality of care through this period is something we will be monitoring through the committee, but we've sort of dealt with that through the previous conversation. So thank you for that. We need to note the changes to the registration with the CQC.
Yes, that's correct. I'm just seeking board approval to progress those.
I think I'm getting nods. Yes, you have that. Thank
Agreed.
you very much. Can I move to the integrated performance report?
Yes, Chair. So I'm just going to pick out a few points that are mentioned in the report and give an update, particularly in relation to the last conversation. So obviously wanting to note the areas of good practice, but I wanted to focus just a little bit on our out of area placement position. So just to remind colleagues that in January we had 37 patients placed out of area, with 20 by the time that we'd got to the last board. There's been a lot of hard work and actions undertaken so that we're now in a position of having 3 acute ECRs and 3 patients in psychiatric intensive care units. They're female only intensive care units. So I anticipate that we'll be very close to having 0 acute out of area placements, patients placed out of area by the end of March, which was our internal trajectory. And I just want to mention that because I think that's incredibly important. The focus on the delayed patients who are delayed transfer of care and are medically fit for discharge is something that the wider system is looking at. And I'm really pleased that mental health is being considered within that. As of today, we have 94 patients. 43 of those are medically fit for discharge and 51 are patients who have a delayed transfer of care. And I'm pleased to be able to report that just even this morning, I've had several emails coming through of services that are being made available to step down those patients so that we can maximise the amount of capacity. It's really important, as we've already mentioned this morning, to be able to free up and make sure that patients with a mental health disorder who don't have a physical health problem, that they're not in the A&E departments, given the pressures that those departments are under. So having capacity to be able to quickly place somebody into a local bed is really important. And last night, I mean, it's certainly true that our demand has decreased. Yesterday, we didn't have any patients at close of play waiting to be assessed or requiring an inpatient bed. But we know that that will change and demand will increase, and we want to be in the best possible position going forward to make sure that happens. It's really important that a lot of the work that we have been doing continues. We've talked a lot this morning about business as usual and making sure that we've got the basics in place. Our waiting time, meeting our waiting time target has been a challenge. But having said that, in adult services in February, 82% of our patients were assessed in the last quarter, which is an improved position and is a positive achievement given the pressures on waiting times. What we know with having to step down some of that routine activity is that the board can expect that our position may deteriorate, but important that we maintain the urgent work and we keep in touch with the patients, so if their position changes, we can make sure that we are supporting them. Similarly, for our CAM services, where crisis and urgent cases are needing to be seen in the community, those are being prioritised, and some staffing resources are being diverted to support those patients. That's really important. We want to continue with our progress that we're making around making sure all patients have got a valid care plan and a risk assessment, and that we still are wanting to reach that target by the end of Q1. So we continue having the measures in place that we agreed to have. And I suppose finally, I just wanted to say that although you know, the incident and the situation we're in at the moment with COVID-19, although that may mean that performance with some KPIs may slip, the expectation is that we will, it will be important that we really do focus on some of those really important issues like staff supervision, which is going to be incredibly important at this difficult time to support our staff, make sure that they're getting the right level of direction and care and support that they need, and particularly where they're moving into occupying new roles. So we'll continue to have that strong focus on supporting our staff and those sorts of KPIs at this challenging time. Happy to pick up any particular questions outside of what I've already said, Chair.
Okay, Sim, thank you very much. And I think we understand the importance of maintaining, you know, an eye on the basics, the basic quality of care, and things like support and supervision through this period. Are there any questions for Sim on the integrated performance report, please?
I just wanted to say again, you know, what a staggering amount of work, and you know, I think going back to your first point about, you know, reaching that target of none in acute by the end of March is really fantastic. So I just want to thank you and others for all the work that you're doing on this.
Yeah, and I would want to reiterate that. I think that's an amazing issue.
Chair, can I just make just one key point that I'm sure would be saying the same thing. One of the things that's really important, when I was talking earlier on about moving staff around to make sure that we can maintain those business critical services, really important that we continue focusing on the safer staffing levels in our wards. So that's something that we are reviewing on a daily basis and making sure that we're managing that in a safe, effective way.
Yeah. And Peter, Rick here, could I just come in on something about safer staffing and making sure that we've got the right staff in the right place? And this is a conversation that I'm having with colleagues across in acute trusts, where we have trainees on our rotations who are being asked, can they move across to acute to support them? And that's an active conversation that we're looking at day by day. But I can see the likelihood that some of our foundation years, so the newer trainees, will be recalled to acute trusts to help with their the surge in demand there, which means we're making sure that we've got rotas, cover for wards in place. But the point I'm making is that it's a conversation that is happening on a daily basis with my kind of chief medical officer colleagues in acute, and how we manage our medical workforce across the whole system is really important, and we're being as supportive as we can, whilst also bearing in mind that we don't want to understaff our own services.
Yes, thank you. Gordon.
Yes, I guess one of the things that was in the report, in the quality report, was the fact that there were some rota gaps that needed to be filled by consultants working as registrars. And I just one of the things that came up at that meeting was the fact that we should be monitoring that process. It wasn't large, it wasn't a large number, but and I don't know what Rick's view is about whether that is likely to happen more often, more frequently now over this next period of time. But I do think it's important that that is monitored if consultants have to work down at the lower level.
Yeah, thank you, Gordon. So we've got quite an extensive contingency plan for medical staffing during this next few months. One of which is that we may, I wanted to know what would it look like if we had a consultant-only service. So let's say worst case scenario, all our trainees move into acute services. So we have consultants and hire trainees to man our wards and community services, what that would look like and what a rota would look like. And that's exactly right. Consultants would be expected to be the ward doctor, as it were. So at the moment, we're running training on reskilling or refreshing the skills that our consultants have on managing a ward and what it will be like to be junior doctors. And just to say, I wrote a letter yesterday to all our medical staff, really wanting to engage them fully in working together as doctors, and reminding them that myself as well, the reason we went into medicine was to be doctors, to care for patients. And I've had some tremendous response back from them today. We've got a workforce who really are on board with this, even though it's going to be challenging and tough, and we're going to be asking people to do some things that are outside of their usual job plans and comfort zones, but people are on board with this.
Okay, thank you very much, Rick. That was really helpful. So Sim, thank you for the report. I mean, clearly some, a staggering amount of work has gone into reducing the ECRs, and it's to be hoped that we can maintain that position, but we should just acknowledge the amount of work that to get to that much better position. Clearly, in the weeks ahead, one of the things is going to be, being able to move patients to the right type of care at the right time, and the work on what we call delayed transfers of care, but which clearly is slightly wider, is going to be a system issue, and hopefully we can get the support of the system to do that. And this is something no doubt we will come back to. We very much support the points you're making about safer staffing and the need to get the right workforce in the right place as much as possible. So thank you very much for the report, and thank you for the work that lies behind it. I'm going to move us on though for today, if that's okay with people. Gavin, we said we would bring equality, diversity, inclusion today. I mean, Sam's already made the point that it's really important that while we're under pressure, we try and maintain the work we're doing to improve to continue to improve our culture, and clearly equality, diversity, inclusion is an important part of that. So can I hand over to you? You could assume we've read the report, but can I just hand over to you to make whatever key points you want to make, please?
Absolutely, Chair, and thank you. I think what I'd like to do is just share a couple of headlines with the board to draw out from the report. Firstly, in relation to the gender pay gap report, and it's obviously pleasing to note that our overall mean gender pay gap has reduced from 13.6% to 12.44% in 2019, and there's been a particular reduction in the gender pay gap for our Agenda for Change staff. And one of the contributing factors to that is we have definitely sharpened up some of our processes and arrangements, particularly in relation to starting pay, to ensure that there is greater consistency. And as I say, I think it's particularly pleasing to see that that is starting to have an impact in relation to gender pay gap. Regretfully, the story isn't quite so positive for medical colleagues in that the gender pay gap has increased, and two main causes for that. One is the nature of full-time and part-time staff in our medical workforce. The predominant our part-time staff are females. And there is also the legacy issue of the Clinical Excellence Awards. And whilst we've taken action to remove the pro rata arrangements for part-time staff in terms of what they receive if they're awarded a Clinical Excellence Award, as I say, it's a legacy issue, and that is going to take some time, probably years, to work through fully. In terms of the ethnicity pay gap, again, it's pleasing to see that we have slightly reduced the ethnicity pay gap in each of the three main staffing groups. But I think the report does clearly highlight the previous discussion we've had about the importance of talent management, particularly for our BAME colleagues. And I've referred to that elsewhere in the report. And then the third section of the report, Chair, really is just providing a bit of an update following the November board paper I presented in terms of some of the arrangements that we're putting in place to manage our equality, diversity, and inclusivity agenda. I wasn't proposing to go through those, but obviously very happy to answer any questions.
Gavin, thank you. That's really helpful. Are there any questions for Gavin?
Yes, Peter, I've got one.
Okay.
So, Gavin, I was just thinking, I mean, I appreciate you've got lots to do, but when I was with Disability Rights UK, we're clearly concerned about the sort of people's disabilities leading to sort of lower pay grades, less of them at senior level, etc. And given that we're a mental health trust, I wonder what your view might be about looking at the development of peer supporters and the development of people with lived experience because they've got lived experience entering our workforce. And if in the future there might be some data we should, in your view, be collecting around ensuring there's not a huge pay gap around people with disabilities, particularly mental health in mental health trusts. And if that should be something we would consider in the future, that data gathering it.
I think that's a really good point, Anne, so thanks for raising it. I'm particularly conscious that, you know, if I look at the staff survey and our most disaffected staff groups, they would be our BAME colleagues and staff with a disability. So I would be particularly keen in terms of pay gap reporting to also be focusing on staff and colleagues with a disability. So I certainly think that's something that we could be looking at moving forward.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Gavin?
Peter, can I just come in briefly?
Of course, Anna, yes.
Say I was very pleased to see the report on changes to the Clinical Excellence Award scheme, and I just recognise that problem you've got with actually you're not going to be able to sort this out for some time, but just welcome the changes that have been made, and the fact that this means that, you know, we have made progress on that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Sam, did I see you come in?
Yeah, not so much a question, more of a comment. So I think it's good to note some improvement around our gender pay gap, so that 1% improvement. And equally, if we remove our medical staff from the group, that reduces to less than 1%. So it really highlights the issues around the medical staff. I just wanted to share that we were expecting the publication of the gender pay gap in medicine published nationally. I suspect, understandably so, that has now been delayed somewhat, but that will be hopefully being published later this year, and they've undertaken a huge amount of research through that, which I think will help us and others who share this issue to tackle some of these quite systemic structural needed in some of these processes. And I know within that report there is a way to section around Clinical Excellence Awards.
Thank you very much. So Gavin, I mean, I think we note the improvements, we note the challenge, and you know that you have our support in trying to address that. And I think, as Anna and Sam have said, that I think some of the steps we're taking hopefully will reinforce that improvement over the next couple of years. But clearly this is a really important issue that even while we're under pressure, we must keep an eye on, because it's, as Sam has said, it's part of us making sure that we're maintaining the culture that we want to have in the organisation. So it's good to see it here today. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair.
So in terms of the annual plan, I think we've seen, we've been involved in the development of the annual plan. It felt important that we brought it here today. I think, Sam, you can assume, one, that we've all been quite actively engaged in the development of this, and that we've read it, but I didn't know if there was anything you particularly wanted to pull out for us.
Thank you, Chair. If okay, I'll hand over to Sally, who's led this particular work with us as the team. Thank you.
Sorry, Sally.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Thank you, Chair. Just to give, take the paper as read, but just to give some context. So, given the COVID-19 response, the national planning process has been suspended, as we were due to submit our plan in early April. But I thought it's important to bring it here for sign off for the board, while it's fresh in our minds, because as Sam and Chair, you've said, we've done a huge amount of work on this. And just to remind colleagues, we did the strategy refresh in the autumn, shaping our plan around people, prevention and partnerships. And we've taken that in the context of trying to set that out for the organisation in a driver diagram format around our core standards, annual objectives and long-term strategic developments. We recognise with what's going on at the moment that some of these things may need to be suspended until later in the year. But I think both Simon, you reflected about the core standards. There are a certain number of things that would be good to continue to address as we go forward. And then in terms of the annual objectives, we've picked out 4 things which will be important to continue in Q1 and through the year. And they're things we've spoken around in terms of the COVID response around our crisis service, shaping up our community services, our digital adoption programme, which is really up and running now, but just importantly to reflect on what we've been doing on our culture, given the command and control response that's been adopted nationally and locally. It's important that we develop our own response to that in more directive and enabling leadership, because that sits better with our culture. So I think those 4 things are really important that we continue over the first quarter and through the year. And then finally, just to flag up the section on the financial plan, clearly that's going to change. So we're expected to deliver a small surplus next year of 62k, and we had a challenging service improvement plan and an ambitious capital programme. Given things with COVID around the first quarter block contract, which is being announced today, I'll have a look at that later to make sure that we're not disadvantaged. Suspension of some of the national efficiency savings, and the things that are unfolding around the construction industry, we will have to revisit the how deliverable the financial plan is in that context. We can bring that back at a later date, Chair, but happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. I mean, firstly, fantastic piece of work, and I really like, and I know other colleagues do because they've told me, I like the plan on the page, and I think where we can see the core standards, the breakthrough objectives, and the must-dos. I have to say the long-term plan must-dos are ambitious, but clearly that's something that is expected. Certainly, as of now, that's what's expected. We'll have to see what flexibility comes down the line. My question, Sally or Sam, I think is, it seems to me that as we go into this period, and we've talked today quite a lot about, you know, the aftermath, and there's something for me about the fact that our outcomes in the strategy on a page are quite outward looking, but this feels a little bit, obviously this is our plan, so it's slightly more internally focused. But you mentioned earlier in the meeting, Sam, about being, you know, the need for us to be an anchor institution or part of an anchor network moving forward when hopefully we have COVID-19 behind us. And I wonder whether that needs just to be reflected here, maybe in the breakthrough objectives. But you may feel it's covered in there already.
Thank you, Chair. I think that's a really helpful point, and Sally and I were reflecting on that together. And I think it's certainly intrinsic as part of the objective around the integrated care system, but I do think within our plan on the page we could be more specific about that, and that would be my proposal, Chair, that we build in and make it clear that our work around developing the integrated care system and our part in that is so absolutely connected to becoming the anchor institution to learn disability within the system.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on the annual plan? Can we approve that, please?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Happy to approve, Peter.
Thank you. Can we now move to the committee reports? I will take them fast and wait for you to slow me down. So Finance and Investment Committee.
So as presented and as ever, we've been overtaken by another meeting. We had one on Friday, and therefore I know this Sally quite a lot, but other than highlighting the fact that the same old familiar friends of out of area, adult services agency staff, support services, the SIP are the challenging areas and around the challenging areas. I think month 11, which we focused on Friday, at which point I'll probably hand over to Sally, gives a clearer and obviously more up-to-date picture than the F&I paper, which I propose just we note at this stage.
Okay, thank you. Well, we'll certainly take that recommendation. Sally, is there anything you wanted to add?
No, if I move into the month 11 report and then just pick up some highlights for that. So take the report as read, to say that we are in making good progress in the negotiations with commissioners and hopefully hoping to close that today in terms of additional funding from out of area placements, and also one of our financial risks around NHS property services, hoping to close that off by the end of the week. As Martin said, there's a number of things that have challenged us this year around out of area placements and use of agency and service improvement plans. You've heard from Simon around out of area placements. Good news at the moment, but we need to be mindful of what might be coming down the line in terms of people's mental health and need for those services. There's a whole piece of work around workforce, and in this uncertain time, I suspect we'll be using more agency. So we have put some controls in place to make sure that the agencies are not benefiting from the crisis situation that we're in. And finally, in terms of cost pressures, we're developing a new group. Again, might not be able to stand this up in full in the first quarter, to make sure that delivery of our service improvement plans are seen as a whole system in terms of an internal trust response rather than through each individual CDS and support service. But happy to take that, and then we'll hopefully have good news to report for month 12 at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions for Sally? No. Well, in which case, Sally, I mean, thank you for that. Thank you for that report. And as you say, there are things there that we obviously need to keep an eye on in terms of making sure that we've got a sustainable organisation going forward. But thank you for reporting such a good position at this stage of the year. Is there anything else on the finance report, Sally?
No, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Audit Committee report. Do we have Lewis?
Just very generally, fantastic response from you and from the team and all the supporting teams from the conversation that's gone on so far. In terms of the Audit Committee, a couple of comments. There was an Audit Committee held on Monday. The audit opinion from the internal auditors has saved a disaster between now and next week. It is very good, which is good news, so no distractions there. External audit requirements are evolving and probably lighter than in previous years. What we also did at the Audit Committee was we approved the internal audit plan and counter fraud plan, but with a caveat that it can be amended at fairly short notice and it's fairly flexible as the risk profile changes and evolves going forward. And just lastly, this is me signing off. This is my last board. Just many thanks to everyone for help, support, contribution, in particular the exec team and other Audit Committee members, and Corin, who's worked tirelessly in the background to help and assist me.
Okay, Lewis. Well, clearly we had hoped to see you today at your last board meeting, so I'm sorry it's virtual, but if I can just take a moment to thank you for your service to the Trust and for your excellent steerage of the Audit Committee. It is very much appreciated, and I hope that at some point we can thank you properly. But I'm afraid it's a virtual thank you today. But I know that everyone would want to join with me in thanking you for your contribution to the Trust.
Thank you. Yep.
Thank you, Lewis.
Thank you, Lewis. So, I mean, we note the Audit Committee report and note the comments you make about the need for flexibility in terms of how we use particularly the internal auditors going forward, and thank you for that. Freedom to Speak Up Guardian report. I'm going to note this for today. Clearly, it's an important Freedom to Speak Up Guardian is an important route for staff to raise issues and concerns, and obviously that will remain a route for staff to raise any concerns that they may have in the coming months. But I'm proposing just to note the report for today. Is that all right, Sam?
Yes, Chair, we have been joined by Lynn Richardson, who was on the line. The report is comprehensive. I'm not sure if there's anything in particular Lynn wanted to add to that, but I believe she is on the line.
Okay. So I'm proposing to note it. Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest register, as I understand it, that's up to date, and we just need to note that for today. Thank you very much. So I had two points of any other business, and but one was to thank Lewis for his contribution to the Trust. Sam, I think the other thing we probably should note is to thank the staff at HM Prison Lewis and HM Prison Ford. I don't know if any non-execs can help us with passing that message on, but I certainly think that we should note that they've been through quite a turbulent time, and that that service is coming to an end next week. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add, Sam.
I just think, Chair, just to absolutely reiterate that, and just huge thanks to our staff who work in our prison services that we've been running since 2012 as the services transferred to KUK. At the end of this month, I also want to thank our leadership team and staff working with forensic services who have gone absolutely above and beyond to support the delivery of care in the prison over recent weeks. And we really do wish this staff group all the best, and clearly we will be staying in touch with them.
Indeed. Thank you very much. So, is there any other business? Nope.
No.
Reflections? Did we add value? Did we have patience at the heart of our business, our conversations? Were we? Martin.
I wanted to say the focus of the meeting reflects the Herculean efforts of the staff and the leadership and those that are led. I do hope we've added value, and maybe in the future we can just squeeze the time still further, but maybe meet more frequently, because it's actually, for my own mental health, it's quite sustaining to see what wonderful things our people are doing. So if we've added value to them, that's great. You've certainly added value to me.
Thanks, Martin.
I just want to say thank you so much, and you know, just kind of echo Martin's words. I just think you're all doing the most incredible job in really difficult circumstances, and I'm immensely proud to be part of this team.
Thank you.
Echo both those points.
Yeah.
Can I just say how much I appreciated the clarity of the reporting? I thought the clarity of the reporting from the executive team was really, really good.
Yeah.
And just the reflective practice that comes through and the values that come through that reporting was really strong and really palpable and fantastic. So thank you very much for that. Yeah. I think we'll stop the meeting. My only reflection is I think today we had a lot of information to catch up on, and I certainly would plan. I think we can think about how we use Part A and Part B differently next time, albeit that it is 8 weeks away. And I think probably therefore we can condense the time even more, particularly if we get the updates, I've lost the simple word, but the updates that will come between now and the end of June. I think we could then aim for a shorter meeting. That's partly because we want to reduce the burden on the executive, and partly because actually concentrating like this for an extended period is not the easiest either. Can I thank you all for your participation? I know that everyone, all the non-execs, really appreciate the work that's going on at the moment. We will keep out of your way when that is helpful, but we stand ready to do whatever you ask and need of us in the meantime. So best of luck to you all, and thank you for this morning. Thank you very much indeed.